Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at Micron Technology. It is time for another update, and on this chart we have been tracking the area of a 1-2 setup where now we are looking for the third wave to unfold to higher prices. Within this wave 3 we have been tracking an initial wave 1 to the upside initially to have formed potentially a top, and we were looking for a wave 2 correction. But we haven't reached the area of support, and I believe we are either seeing an extension within this 5-wave pattern we have been tracking, or that it is a completely different count where we would need instead to track this yellow idea of a series of 1-2 setups throughout this movement to the upside. Yeah, here a 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, another 1-2 setup here, and this would be unfolding as the third wave to the upside. This has been made possible solely due to the impulsiveness and strength of this movement, this development from the last, nearly a year already. And based on the current pattern we find internally within this structure, in either scenario, white or yellow, I would be looking still for continuation to higher prices. Now, before we get into the smaller time frame, I would like to go through the ideal targets for the larger time frame. So here we are tracking the 138.2% extension of the wave 1 for the ideal target of the wave 3. Now remember, it doesn't need to stop there, but for us to be able to track a wave 4 with some confidence, we would need at least to achieve this level. So we are watching the $3,900 level at the 138.2% extension of the wave 1. Then internally, we notice that if we are to form a more substantial top in this 5-wave move to the upside, it might be easier to actually consider that this isn't even a wave 1 but a wave C instead. It is a risk that I wanted to point out. Yeah, remember, we are always looking for the 1-2 setup. Once we have 3 waves complete, that is the likely part of an uptrend. Now, we will of course track internal levels of support for continuation to higher prices even within this yellow interpretation, and before we actually fail to hold those levels of support, I cannot even rule out the possibility of a more direct formation of the actual wave 3. And if this is to follow through in the yellow structure, I would believe we would far exceed this ideal target, the $1,300 level within this pattern. Yeah, simply put, based on the internal structure alone we have formed throughout the years, throughout the nearly decades already, we are able to track such severe extensions within this pattern that we would be getting only within this push to the upside possibly to this ideal target. Yeah, once we have this supposed wave 3 in yellow complete, we could see a 4th and a 5th and already reach those targets. I would see no problem for this chart to form one of the stronger extensions we would see throughout the next decades. Now, internally, we are also able to track an ideal target for the actual wave 3 in yellow, and that would also be at the 138.2% extension of the wave 1. That is around the $650–$660 level, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I may have not drawn this perfectly, but no, it looks like it is the $640 level. Now, around that area anyway. It is rough estimation because I didn't use the magnetic tool to get an exact price point, and it's not even important to have the exact level, but this is an approximation of what we could be looking for if we were to form a reliable wave 3 and be able to look for a wave 4 correction. Now, based on the internal structure, I would be inclined to believe that we would also exceed this level, because I'm looking to form a more substantial top within the internal wave 3 of this large movement, and once that is complete, yeah, I would have to say we would only need to form a 4th and the 5th within this area, and it seems reasonable to stop around that price point. Now, nonetheless, if you remember, in the initial wave 1 to the upside, we were tracking a potential wave 2 correction, and we were tracking an area of support to look for potential positions. We didn't get to that level of support, and while it's still my main interpretation to track this still as a 1-2 setup, it is not at all unlikely to track this as a potential double 1-2-1-2 setup, for example, in which case, even once we form the 3rd, 4th, and the 5th, we would look for another 4-5 pattern, in which case, once again, we could see that level surpassed. We would still need, however, to track an internal level of support, and fortunately it will overlap heavily with what we will track for the wave 4 correction in the yellow structure. Now at this point, I believe we can focus more on the internal pattern, because before we can even look for this wave 3 to form a more substantial top, or even this wave C to be inclusive, I would need to still form a 4th and a 5th. I would still need to build the entire pattern within this area. And for that, I would actually need to have a top within this wave 3. And at the moment, I believe we are able to still see one more high within this area with little doubts. So internally, I'm looking for this orange interpretation. I'm tracking a potential internal 1, 2, 3rd, 4th, and a 5th in this area. And in the previous video, we were still looking for potential extensions in an impulse in this push to the upside, but I have to say, this is starting to become a less likely interpretation for me. So if we were to manage to hold shallow retracements in a correction in a wave 4 in this area, something like that, I would have been more inclined to believe that we were instead building an impulse still, and that we would still be looking to form even another 4th and a 5th to the upside before we would track this count as more clearly complete. Based on this extension to lower prices, I am more inclined to believe that this interpretation, while it is still possible and I do see it even acceptable to hold the area of support in my expectations for the internal pattern in this correction, I would prefer to actually focus on the idea of an ending diagonal instead. It seems to be lining up much better in this idea instead. It's nothing new, yeah, we have talked about this possibility in the previous videos, but we were tracking a more potentially bullish interpretation to provide a closer area of support and to provide an earlier invalidation, an earlier signal that this structure was going to form a slightly less bullish interpretation. Now, nonetheless, we are still looking for at least one more high even within this idea, and nothing is really changing, because in the internal structure we would still be looking for an A, B, C pattern to unfold, for which we have an extended area of support down to the $292 level now. In this idea of an A, B, C pattern, I'm looking to build a 5-wave move to the downside within this supposed wave C. Within it, I believe we might actually be able to even track an impulse, and here I would be looking at a potential double 1-2-1-2 setup, a 3rd wave down, 4th wave up, and then I would be looking for a couple of additional 4-5 patterns to consider a more substantial bottom to already be in place. In such an idea, I would be watching the levels of resistance for the wave 4 correction between the 23.6% retracement, the $376.4, all the way up to the 50% retracement at the $390.9 level. We are not watching the 61.8% retracement, as we are not looking at this pattern as a diagonal structure. Now, here's the thing. If we manage to break above the 50% retracement, we would not really be able to look for an impulse to form within this area. We might still be able to track an ending diagonal within the wave C, yeah, especially considering that we could look at this as an A, B, C pattern in a wave 1 instead. Yeah, we do have an ever so slightly higher high in this push to the upside, so we would be able to look for a potential wave 4 correction in an ending diagonal. I cannot rule that out, but it would strongly improve the likelihood of having a more substantial bottom in place and the ability to look for the next 5th wave to the upside. Now, the ultimate level of resistance that I would be watching in this area instead would be here at the 61.8% retracement for this idea of an ending diagonal. So I'm watching the $403.3 level. Above this 61.8% retracement, I would need to consider that this wave to the downside is most likely complete. There is a corner case where it might still see an extension, but I really don't see that as a likely structure. So for the purposes of this chart, we are watching for the $403 level for a break, for a signal that a more substantial bottom within the wave 4 would be in place. Now, once again, it is technically possible to still work out in the idea of an impulse. We didn't break the area of support, so we will be looking for an additional high after this wave to the upside is complete, depending on the internal structure. If we build a 5-wave move to the upside within this area, I will be looking for a fourth and a fifth, for another high to be built after a correction. If we only form a three-wave pattern, however, I would be prepared for a more substantial top to be in place. I will of course look, even once we have the three waves complete, for a potential fourth and a fifth. I will be looking for the potential 5-wave move to be building. I will not discard such a possibility, but until we get evidence that something more bullish would indeed be going on, I would personally be prepared to form a more substantial top within this area. And for context, please remember, we are looking for upside in a fifth wave of a fifth wave, indeed of a larger wave 3, but nonetheless it is towards the end of a more substantial uptrend. Be prepared for a larger correction to occur after. And I'm not predicting all these things. This is just my roadmap that I'm tracking for this chart. It doesn't need to play out in this way, but this is the plan I'm following until I get evidence that something else is going on indeed. Now, of course, a break below the 61.8% retracement we have for continuation to higher prices would be a signal that a more substantial top is already in place within this wave 3 in blue, and while we are still looking for continuation to higher prices, we would need to be prepared for a potentially even deeper correction and even larger, yeah? Remember, within a wave 4 in this area, we would expect something similar in proportions with what we had in a wave 2 correction here, yeah? This correction has taken over a month to develop. Oftentimes, the wave 4 takes even longer. And for now, these are the levels, this is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what else you want me to cover, and I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.